It says it's live. It's loading. Got it. And okay, we're going. All right. So hello. Um, yeah, I haven't been live in a few months, so I thought I would hop on and give a little context about where I am and what it is that I'm doing here. Um, yeah. So I also didn't announce this. So I've noticed that if I prepare or plan too much, I keep planning to start instead of just starting. So I'm just hopping on. Um, but I imagine there'll be something like a schedule that'll come out soon. So um, yeah, I'm fresh back from Mexico. I went to an intensive kind of, we'll call it a meditation retreat. I don't know how much of the context is going to emerge as I talk about this, but this is a pretty big event um, that like appropriate cautions, etc., given the modern day. Um, but the intention was a kind of spiritual grounding, a sort of a meditative focus that um, seemed very important given where we are collectively. One of the big things that came up for me, for my own internal work um, in the course of that retreat, was a recognition that a lot of the places where I am actually talking about myself, I will project outwards. I'll talk about, well, you know how there's this phenomenon where you, or here's this pattern that happens with humans. And I am seeing patterns pretty often. I'm seeing actual structures. But sometimes I'm not. And, and more importantly, a lot of the time, what I'm actually doing is talking about what's going on for me. So, um, like a couple of weeks ago, I was referring to um, how there are a lot of spiritual practices like doing sweat lodges or intense dances that seem very hard on the body. And I was referring to how, well, there's this like why are we hard to ourselves this way? But one of the facilitators reflected back to me, I don't mind these experiences. I don't mind what happens to my body with this, or like when smoking mapacho, which is sort of what they call tobacco in certain parts of um, like medicine communities. People who do things like ayahuasca, they'll call it mapacho. So I think that's the Peruvian name for the tobacco plant. Saying, well, like when I breathe the mapacho, like it doesn't bother me. So I think you're talking about yourself. So hearing that from her, there is a recognition that it's come to me many times before, but I'm sort of deepening now. I'm sort of getting some more context and some more focus about this, about how much I do a particular type of move where I'm trying to share something that I see, and I'm trying to convey some of the importance of it. But in doing so, I'm distancing myself from my own experience, and I'm trying to talk from some sort of perspective that is disembodied. It has become very, very clear to me that, as one person I've been working with, Perry Chase, puts it, you can only teach what you embody. So I'm paying attention to, oh, that I can, rather than just taking this as an idea, I can actually feel it. I can feel the way that what I have to transmit lands abstractly when I am not embodying it. So a a practice for myself, for my own cultivation, which others might benefit from, we'll see, um, is to show up talking about my own experience, my own practice, my own edges. Um, I keep finding, and I sort of know this in the back of my head, that, oh, this makes sense about people's experience, but I keep finding that when I share what's at the edge of my growth, what I am working on, this seems to resonate with others a lot better than when I am giving abstract theories about, well, this is how a human psyche works, and these are the game theory structures that go on in the human mind, etc. Um, and with that said, I want to be honest that my goal here is not to impact others. Um, I think that might be a side effect, but I've come to recognize that when I target that as an effect, that's when um, my my need for validation gets in the way of my desire to communicate clearly. So instead, what I'm intending to do here is focus on what are my experiences? What is it that I am working with? For instance, here, I'm doing a very meta thing. I'm highlighting this way in which, for me, there's been a struggle with focusing on my lived experience and how I am showing up and what I am finding difficult and what I find precious, what I see in the world, putting the perspective from which I'm looking into my communication with myself primarily, but also in interacting with others. So for me, that's a context that sets much of the intention of me starting this particular arc, this particular challenge. I've got a lot of others. Like one of the weirdest ones. We'll find out how much I get into this later, but part of my experience in coming back from Mexico was like every now and then I'll get possessed by writing. Like just a writing piece just demands to come through me, and of all the things, like of all the things that could possibly possess me, the one that came over me after all this meditation and this focus on the nature of self and on my own sense of being and feeling into the structure of consciousness, what wanted to come through me was an article summarizing a coherent way of understanding astrology. This is coming from being in a community of people who really value astrology, and from me staring at it and going, well, what is it that is so meaningful to you about this? And can I feel the value, like which is like a separate question from is it real, does it work, does it actually predict? Making that distinction has been important to me. But it didn't seem like it was the level of importance that would be the first thing I write about when I come back. And yet that's what I find. So sharing some of the energy of what's going on with that, why that would arise, what my experience is of it arising, like that's real, that's lived, and that's something about how I experience the world. It interconnects with the things that if you've been tracking my my activities, you note that in August I had this whole stream of, look, here's this picture of the world and the picture of the structure of the self. And I still think that stuff is basically right. Looking at what is the direction that we could go in collectively. But I've noted that when I'm talking about these things from a perspective that is, here is what we could do. This is what you can do. Here is the thing to pay attention to. Like there's like I notice when I imagine the experience of somebody else receiving that kind of communication, there's a sort of like there's a bit of a contraction. But if I highlight, look, here in this situation, like here I am showing up on Facebook Live, and there's this bit of self-consciousness about how I did all this stuff in August, and I wanted to continue, but something resisted in me, and I wasn't sure how to deal with that. And now here I am showing up again about 4 months later. There's some there's this dance of embarrassment. There's some question about, do I need to justify something? And I don't believe that I do, but I can feel that. I'm noticing that. I'm tracking it. Noticing and experiencing these things makes sense to me as a way of helping to keep my mind clear and my emotions aligned with what I see is a powerful direction for me, for the people around me, and for the way that I can contribute to the world. So there's a way where speaking about that, I'm imagining is easier for people to receive. And then there arises for me a question. Why have I tended to avoid talking about my experience and grounding it in my embodiment? I have glimmers of answers. I don't really know yet. Yeah, this lighting is terrible, isn't it? I don't know, that makes it worse. Cool. Yeah. So the idea of this challenge, this comes from Perry Chase. Perry Chase has this lovely model that feels like it resolves a lot of the challenges that I've had with how do I create a living based on being of service to a kind of energy in the world that I care about. I see a potential for the human race, and one that I want to live in, and I see an alternative that is the default that frightens me. How do I relate to that? How do I encourage something better? How do I do it in a way that doesn't exhaust me? I've co-built a company before. I've helped run organizations. I know how to hustle, and I hate it. My system does not tolerate it very well. So how do I thrive in a context where I'm just showing up? And she has some really fascinating answers to that. And I've been listening to a lot of her suggestions. And um, and a lot of it just comes back to, well, what's true? What do I know is true? And there's a very concrete suggestion that she'd given some people that I listened to, and I went, well, this wasn't meant for me per se, but I can see the value of it, so I'm going to try playing with this, which is this 100 days of visibility, which is like a lot of other social media challenges, but instead of trying to build up marketing or trying to get attention, what I'm doing is attuning to what it is that I want to be in service to, and showing up and finding out what happens. Not planning, here is the arc of my curriculum, this is the message I want to convey, this is the impact I want to get, this is the interest, can I get people onto my Patreon, can I get them onto my mailing list? Not worrying about any of that. All I'm doing is showing up and finding out for myself what it is like for me to show up this way. Given that it's me, I'm likely to cover the same topics and continue to go deeper in some of them. And because it's me, I'm probably going to dig into theory because the way my mind works, what's alive for me is often about theory. It matters to me that I'm tracking something about how memetics works and how memes are operating in my psyche and in my body. It matters that I see what is possible for the future and how I can relate to it. Right? So those theories will play a role, but instead of talking about this is something that I want to create an infection that is like creating positivity through the world, yada yada, there's a lot of unowned me in that statement. A lot of I want to be valuable, I want validation, so I'm going to show up with this profound theory and amaze people. And if it spreads, then good things happen, and I'll pretend that it's not about me. And I'll try to make it not about me, but secretly it kind of is. Well, if it's about me, it's not about the person listening. It's not about humanity. It's not about the energy that we're to serve. When I say energy, I'm speaking of something um, that we don't actually have a good word for in English. It's, this kind of stuff gets very messy if you get lost in belief systems too readily. So my intention is to show up for 100 days. Because I work better by having it on a schedule, I will probably pick the same time of day once I get into a rhythm. Obviously, coming up on the holidays, that's going to be complicated. Right now, I'm at an Airbnb. So this is part of my process of heading to Mexico and then coming back. I live with my parents right now, and I don't want to risk making them ill. So I'm quarantining myself at an Airbnb, and that'll continue for about another week. And then I'll shift to my usual settings so you get to see my my closet behind me again. But my intention is to make a point of showing up each day and to reveal something of what's going on for me. Now, before that is actually the intention to attune to for lack of a better term, it's like there are these cosmic frequencies. I mean, some people are serving truth, other people are serving power. Like there's a lot of things that people can serve, but it's sort of like there's this cosmic um, uh, the cosmic bandwidth of, or a cosmic range of radio signals, and I'm tuning into one in particular. I don't yet have a great name for it. For now, I'm holding it as clarity. This is a specific kind of clarity. Something about, great, so why did you say that? Not what story comes up when you ask yourself, why did you say that, but why did you actually say that? Right? There's something about looking at truth in a very particularly clear way that seems to be something like mine to serve. What I naturally resonate with, what I enjoy serving, what I'm well shaped to serve. When I say serve, I don't mean to imply something that is in a paradigm that a given person can't stand, but I'm not going to try to protect everybody's worldviews here. I could just as well say there is a way of being that I highly value, that I want to cultivate in myself, and that if I can resonate clearly with, I might be able to encourage in others. And it's not me doing it, it's the resonance. So I intend to show up 100 days. Like whether I want to or not, I have no trouble with this kind of discipline when I actually set my mind to it. I've just been trying to be careful with, not sure how to say that. I'm trying to be careful with the font of creativity in a way that I have not been careful of before. So applying discipline to make myself do something on a regimented schedule in ways that fit the narrative of the wider culture that is busy falling apart, but don't actually serve the human soul. And I'm good at that kind of follow through, but I want that follow through to be in service to something meaningful, to something true, to something embodied, something from the heart. Which doesn't mean abandoning the clarity of thought. Sorry, doesn't mean abandoning the clarity of mind. Thought is insane. Thought is programs. So, yeah, if you're curious to watch, welcome to tune in. When it becomes possible, I will announce the schedule of how this goes. Thanks for listening.